Hello and welcome to the oddschecker betting show sponsored by 888 Sport. I'm your host George Elek and this is a Cheltenham Festival Day 3 preview, the Thursday of the Cheltenham Festival, and I'm joined by two expert guests who know what it takes to back a couple of winners at the festival, oddscheckers Andy Holding and tipster Rory Delargy as well. Before we get the thoughts of the guys, I was lucky enough, Andy and I were both lucky enough to speak to 888 Sport ambassador and Cheltenham Festival multiple winning jockey Barry Geraghty on his thoughts on the day's racing. Yeah, before we get into Thursday, day 3 of the Cheltenham Festival preview with Andy and Rory Delargy, delighted to be joined by 888 Sport ambassador and someone who knows a thing or two about riding winners at the Cheltenham Festival, Barry Geraghty. Barry, thank you for joining us. And on this Thursday preview, we cannot have you on and not talk to you about an old friend of yours, somebody who experienced some great days with at the festival in Champ. Before we look at his bid to win the Stayers Hurdle, something we probably didn't anticipate we'd be saying a couple of years ago, let's look back to that incredible RSA. And you know, you look back at that race now and it's aged. Not only was it an unbelievable watch, I was there on the day, it was just absolutely extraordinary what you did in that last, basically up the hill in that last furlong, but beating Manila Indo and Allaho, you know, last year's Ryanair winner and last year's Gold Cup winner. That form can't really have got much better in time. I mean, how do you remember that incredible day?
Well, it was a very strong race, and with full respect for Manila Indo and Allaho, and probably knew they were the two to beat, but I suppose for them to turn out to be the Ryanair and Gold Cup winner the following year was, on reflection, it made it all the sweeter. But Champ had his difficulties, jumping was questionable, but we knew he had the class. And I suppose how I approached the race was, I remember actually speaking to JP beforehand, and he just said to me, go as wide as you want for a bit of better ground, that's a license to me, because there's nothing better. You're on the second days on the Wednesday ground, so it's been used on the Tuesday, not so fresh on the inside when it's on the slow side. So to go out, go for room, and a horse like him whose jumping wasn't as good as you would like, when you have that extra bit of room, you can just let them warm and you find a steady rhythm, nothing too fancy. So I nursed them through the race, and probably you're riding them on instinct, really, going as well as you can go or being as close as you can be at all stages. But I remember jumping the third lap, and the field had actually concertinaed. We'd stacked up a little bit on the run to 3 out. So I'm only about 3 or 4 lengths down off Allaho and Manila Indo, and I jumped the third last, and I'm nursing away into the straight. Then the two from the front quickened, and they went right away from me. But you're probably 3.5 furlongs from home. So I'm thinking, I know if I roll the dice now, I'm not going to get home. So all I could do was just trust your instinct and try and nurse them home. But I knew probably about 5 strides off the last fence, when I could see I was meeting it on a perfect stride, I could just have the luxury just to look up and put an eye on Manila Indo. And I saw him miss the last a little bit, and I knew straight away, I said, we've a chance here. And as soon as we touched down, I threw the kitchen sink, and it was a great feeling to be about, I'd say, 70 yards from the post, or maybe 100 yards from the post, 3 lengths down, and knowing it's in the bag. It's a very unusual feeling at a Cheltenham Festival, but it was a good one.
I was going to ask you, in that circumstance, whether or not when you're throwing the kitchen sink and you're trying to chase down 2 horses and you just squeeze there and get home, do you know you've won? But you said you already knew with 100 yards to go.
He won a length. So it was, when I landed the back of the last, I knew I had a squeak. I had a chance, and I threw everything at him, and straight away he responded. And I knew with Manila Indo's mistake at the last, he was vulnerable. I knew Allaho was paying the price for going early. They were sitting ducks, if you like. So 50 yards after the last, this is happening. 100 yards after the last, I'm thinking, this is nearly in the bag at this stage, because I had the time.
And am I right in thinking that that it cost you and your followers a few quid?
It was my nap of the meet in Manila Indo. I remember doing all the previews on the build-up, doing this podcast as well with yourself, watching nap of the meet in Manila Indo, and I still can't watch that race without feeling how on earth did that happen. There's some races when you watch back at Cheltenham, you still think your horse is going to win. I remember Direct Route back in the day, Barry, I thought he was going to win. Still think he's won to that day, and Noah Williamson just didn't quite get the better of Edredon Blow with McCoy. And the Manila Indo Allaho clash was exactly the same. All the way around, I kept thinking he's won this, no problem. But along came Barry, and one of his finest hours. Unfortunately, it was one of my least favourable races to watch back. But yeah, just shows you never say never in any of those races.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my payout on my Goshen bets in 2020.
Yeah,
exactly. No one's paying out.
Nothing for a moral winner. No such
exactly.
thing.
I'm going to take my slips back on course. First time I've been back since on Tuesday. Barry, let's talk about Champ this year then. Obviously, the return to form in the penultimate start at Ascot was very exciting, and then beaten by a rejuvenated Paisley Park. And that seems to be the way that this race is kind of set up. A lot of horses who we've had doubts about and then returning to form ahead of the festival. Florian Porter is a 7-2 favourite, but Time Hill 9-2, Champ 5-1, Classical Dream 5-1, Paisley Park 7-1. Would you expect Champ, knowing what you know about him over these hurdles, to be in the mix come the close on Thursday?
Well, he has to bounce back from his last run, but this season, for me, it's a little bit of a copy of last season. He had a great run in the Game of Spirit last season, and then he didn't turn up at all in the Gold Cup. He obviously had a great run in the Long Walk this year, and he gets well beaten by Paisley Park. He finished alongside Lisnagar Oscar, who hasn't been in brilliant form either. So unless both horses ran to that level, or Lisnagar actually improved on what he'd done previously, I'm not so sure. So Champ really has to bounce back from that. He has the ability. He does run well around Cheltenham, but I think it's a big comeback mission for him. Florian Porter is obviously favourite because he hasn't ran since Christmas, and Classical Dream has dotted a lot of his copybook in Gorham Park. But to me, those are the two. I think it's a stronger stage hurdle than it's been in the past, in the last couple of years. Time Hill's a good horse, but I think these are better. Classical Dream, Florian Porter, I'd slightly prefer Classical Dream on his Leopardstown win, because I just feel if he that day had got to follow Florian Porter, he would have had the pace to come and do him, haven't been a supreme winner, but he proved how well he stayed. So he hasn't had the ideal prep, but Willie Mullins has had enough time since January to put that right. So I'd be just slightly in Classical Dreams camp over Florian Porter. Champ has the ability, but I'm not just fully convinced he can get back to the level of form he needs to win this.
Just going backwards in time to the first race of the day, the Turners Novice Chase, where we've got a mouth-watering match at the top of the market. I mean, we don't know how many horses are going to turn up here. It could feasibly be two, given how many entries the others in the race have and how they don't want to be taking on these top two. But Bob Bollinger is 6-5, Galopin de Champ is 5-4. If you were given the option of which one to ride, Barry, who would you choose?
Well, from what we've seen to date over fences, Galopin de Champ is, he just blows the roof. He is as good as you will ever see as a novice chaser. And we saw how he went away from the line when he won in Leopardstown last time, when you've Master McShay, who was a previous Grade 1 winner, pulled up within probably 70 or 80 yards across the line. Galopin de Champ was still going. He'd have gone another half mile if it was needed. So he is a high-class performer. He has a lot of pace. He jumps really well. Bob Bollinger hasn't just been as good to date over fences. I think he's going to be better on better ground. I believe he schooled really well last weekend, and everyone was very happy with him. So there is a little bit of improvement needed in Bob Bollinger's jumping, but we know he has the engine from his Ballymore performance last year. So this is a massive clash, and these are two potential superstars. But from what we've seen, if you have to trust what you've seen to date, you would have to just slightly side with Galopin de Champ.
We're going to find out Andy and Rory Delargy's thoughts on that race in just a couple of minutes. But thank you very much to Barry Geraghty for taking the time to talk to us on our Thursday preview. He spoke to us on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. So if you're watching this in reverse order for some reason, make sure you do go and check that out. And we'll be talking to you about Friday's racing in our Friday episode as well. So thank you very much to 888 Sport Ambassador Barry Geraghty. We'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers, boys. Thank you.
Always good to speak to Barry. We spoke to him about the Tuesday, the Wednesday and the Friday racing as well. So do check out those previews there. And before we do get into the first day's preview, it is my time to tell you that oddschecker itself is the only tip that you need for this year's Cheltenham Festival. It is under a week away now, and if you're having a bet, you'll get the most out of it by using oddschecker. So compare the odds and get all the best special offers with oddschecker for the Cheltenham Festival. On then to the first race of Thursday, and it's one of the most intriguing betting heats for a couple of reasons, this one. Andy, will come to you first. It is the Turners Novice Chase, and we've got Bob Bollinger at 6-5, Galopin de Champ at 5-4. We'll deal with the others in the market in a second, but we'll concentrate on that match at the top of the moment. at this stage, do you think the market, having Bob Bollinger, albeit a very, very marginal favourite, I think the exchanges reflect that as well. Do you think he is the right favourite at this stage?
Not in my eyes, no. Certainly based on the time figures that we keep. I mean, look, Bob Bollinger clocked a fantastic time when he won at Punchestown. A lot of people weren't massively impressed by that, but the front two, Bob Bollinger and Capodanno, pulled 30 odd lengths clear of Galliard de Mesnil, who was a good second to Bob Bollinger in the Ballymore last season, and they were really trapping as well. I remember doing the sectionals as well for that race. It was one of the very few circuit sectionals, that I get a season that was over, or 15 seconds and over, quicker than any other race on the card. There was two other chases that day. There was a beginner's chase over I think it was 2 mile 4 as well, that one of Willie Mullins's won Whiskey something, and there was a handicap as well, the very race after. So there was there's some reasonable comparisons, and the circuit time was I remember it was 3 minutes 10, and the next nearest was 3 minutes 25. Straight away I thought Bob Bollinger definitely wins the Turners. Nothing is going to touch that. He's just too good. But then along comes Galopin Des Champs, and he went even faster last time out when he won at the Dublin Racing Festival. He was good the first day when he was eye-poppingly impressive, not only with his jumping but just everything about him that day. He had a certain aura about him. But then he went to the Dublin Racing Festival, and if you compare again his final circuit from the fence going away from the stand to the line, he was basically punch for punch with Chacun Pour Soi if you put the two races up on the screen and let them run. So he's basically run the last lap having already covered 6 furlongs or 5 furlongs, faster than a proper grade 1 chaser and Chacun Pour Soi. But more importantly, his furlong per furlong time figure was far superior. I mean, we've been doing time figures now, myself and Sam and Andy, for 20 odd years, and we've never got a novice chaser running as fast as Galopin Des Champs. He ran to an 82. We've never awarded. I don't think the only novice we've awarded an 80 or above was Monkfish. To put that into some kind of context, the two fastest times in the last 2 years we've got was Shiskin and Ergum in 81 when they clashed at Ascot, and Allaho 82 when he won last year's Ryanair. We all know how quick that was. This fella's done an 82 on his second start over fencing. So we've got Galopin Des Champs, not considerably clear. We've got 78 for Bob Bollinger's run at Punchestown, which ordinarily you'd be absolutely falling over yourself to say how good that was. So the answer to the question, going back to it, I think Galopin Des Champs has got a bit in the hand over Bob Bollinger. That's the way I see it anyway. But it should be a great race. Look, I don't think there's going to be many runners, so it's going to be a tactical joust. Which horse adapts to the fence at Cheltenham? They've never run around the track before, of course. When they both jump well, probably Galopin Des Champs a little bit more spectacularly, with a bit more elan than Bob Bollinger, who's been a little bit novice here, there and everywhere, but by and large, look, his jumping's been fine. This is like Thomas Hearns against Hagler, Klitschko, AJ. Yes, absolutely, yeah. It's just the clash of the meeting, isn't it, for me? This is the purest race we're going to get. The two horses of the utmost class, which bring the best time figures for novices in the last decade to the table. And it's whichever side camp you're in. We're going to get a real good healthy 50% on the one, 50% on the other. It's just going to be a tremendous race. I think the value is definitely Galopin Des Champs, certainly based on the numbers, and I'm just hoping for a great race. Well, I'll have a bet in it. I don't know. It's something that doesn't really float my boat from a betting perspective. There's no each way angle. Do I really want to get involved? Probably not, but I'm very much in the Galopin Des Champs camp.
You say there's no each way angle, but we'll get onto that in a second.
Of course,
we'll talk about that in a sec.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, certainly Galopin Des Champs 5-4 at the moment, and this should hopefully be the first instalment of what could be a pretty special rivalry in the coming years. Rory, he says 50% in one, 50% in the other. Andy says he's in the Galopin Des Champs camp. Are you in the Bob Bollinger camp?
I really like both horses, and I think Andy sums it up. His figures are backed up on what I have here. Galopin Des Champs was visually stunning at Leopardstown over Christmas, and then that's I want to call it the flow gas, the Ladbrokes Novices Chase that he won at Leopardstown in February was you know, it was a race run at a really furious gallop, and he was very, very impressive there as well. He looks the real deal. He just had that blip at Christmas last year when he wasn't right. He went to Limerick and he was also on favourite to win in the Novice Hurdle there, and stopped very quickly and clearly wasn't right. And then he wasn't fit when he came back at Leopardstown, but he really carried all before him after that. And he's taken tremendously well to fences. Bob Bollinger, as we saw, was just enormously impressive in beating very good horses in the Ballymore last year. And although there's been criticism of his jumping, I think he's been absolutely fine. He obviously, Rachel Blackmore was over here for the Ladbrokes Trophy when he made his chase debut at Goran. And all he's done wrong there is he's got in tight to the last, and Dara O'Keefe didn't want him to do anything spectacular, so he's got in a little bit tight and his back end's come up high. He nodded at the third last, but pretty much everything nods at the third last at Goran if you're going as quick as he was, because it's a downhill fence. He just did it to balance himself. I was happy enough with that, and I thought his jumping was very good at Punchestown last time out. When he beat Capodano, who's a very good horse himself. It's a shame that he didn't stand up at Leopardstown next time out, because we would have found out exactly how good Capodano was, and he could still prove it at the festival that he's an absolutely top-class novice himself. Bob Bollinger, he's a very safe jumper. He's less spectacular than Galopin Des Champs, but I wouldn't have his jumping down as being any kind of drawback. I suppose the one thing you wouldn't want to see him doing is going absolutely head-to-head, because then if you're up against a horse who's marginally quicker through the air than you are, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. But I don't think he'd want to do that. The way he was ridden last year was pop, 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 and then turn on the boosters when you hit the hill, and that's what he tried to do again. I'm really looking forward to the clash, but there's not an awful lot in it. I think Galopin Des Champs might start favourite for this. I think part of the reason why he's second favourite at the moment is because he still theoretically has the option of going for the Brown Advisory, and he was expected to go for that for much of the season. So part of the differential in price is just a hangover from that and people trading between the two races. I think once he's confirmed for this, he probably ends up being the marginal favourite ahead of Bob Bollinger, but there'll be very little between them.
So those are the top two, and set to be a titanic clash. But we're recording this. I should date stamp it because this is going to age pretty quickly. But it's Thursday, just before 1 o'clock, and we've been sat here before we recorded, and we were looking through the field, and it's hard to see which of the other horses that currently hold entries are actually going to take them up and run here. You've got L'Homme Pressé is 9-2, Jungle Boogie 14-1. Horton Color 16-1, Saint Sam 16-1, Fury Road 16-1, Gaillard de Mesnil 16s, Statler 20s, Imperial Alcazar. You've got other horses which have now been put out to a huge price. Riviere de Tel is entered as well. Dusart's entered, Blue Lord's entered. I mean, this is going to cut up massively, and feasibly we could be left with two runners, or we could see a couple of horses taking up this in an attempt to try and nick third and a bit of prize money and a bit of stature. I mean, is there an angle here with non-run no bet to back a couple of these? And do we have any hunches that any of these are going to run, except for those top two?
Doesn't look that way, does it? We've had a long, healthy discussion before we did this to almost come up with a field bigger than 4 or 5. We couldn't, could we? That might be the odd one that changes their mind, particularly if connections look at one of the handicaps. I think, well, I've got to beat 24 horses, and you're not guaranteed to win, and there's prize money all the way down the line in the Turners and some good prestige to go with it. Or do they take a view, well, we can't beat Bob Bollinger and Galopin Des Champs, what's the point? We want to try and win. We're only here to win, and you're running the race where you can win, i.e. a handicap against horses who, in theory, you've got a better chance of defeating. So a lot depends, like I say, on what the mindset is of the respective owners who've got other horses in that race. We can only make a case out, arguably, for something like a Jungle Boogie, maybe, who hasn't got, well, he's got other entries, but he's more likely to come here because he's won over 2.5 miles. It seems nonsensical to run in the Arkle. So he might be one, and of course there's going to be a couple of, for want of a better word, I hate saying this, but rags or social runners in some respects.
Yeah.
That's probably a better way of putting it. But yeah, if you're looking at an anti-post bet now, from a place perspective, and you're looking to put some horses in multiples, this is one of the races you need to look at, because there'll definitely only be 4 or 5 runs on a day. There's no way in a million years there'll be 8.
Any thoughts on any we can back at big prices, Rory?
Well, I've thrown a few feelers out trying to find out if anyone's going to run. And I've spoken to a couple of people who said, well, this wasn't the race we were going to run in, but we might leave the horse in and see what happens. So a couple of those who are being aimed elsewhere might be redirected on that basis. I'd be inclined to go for as Andy says, one of the rags, and just hope you get. Gabby-Naka was blindingly obvious. I was 50 to 1 in a place all in yesterday. I thought, well, that Gabby-Naka was perfect for the race. Nothing else is going to run. No sooner had I placed a bet on him than I read that he'd been supplemented for the Arkle. So I mean, that was because he was only in this and the Brown Advisory, and he doesn't stay beyond 2.5 miles. So that looked blindingly obvious. And then with him out of it, you're just left with a bunch of horses who are not intended runners, and even the ones you thought, well, you know, this 100 to 1 shot will be suited by the conditions, and the trainer saying won't run him at the festival at all. Very few you can have at all. I've thrown a few bob at Stolen Silver at a massive price, on the basis that I'd rather be backing a horse at he's 250 to 1 in a place, and that's a crazy price. But you know, any sort of 100 to 125 to 1 is interesting about him, because if you think it's going to cut up badly and you're going to have 2 horses and maybe 2 outsiders in the race, and connections throw him in, you're getting 25 to 1 about him winning a match with something else to get into the frame, and that's attractive. But you're guessing wildly again. He's in the plate, and you'd imagine that's what connections want to do. But the interesting thing about him is that they did run him in the Grade 1 Scilly Isles, so they're not afraid to run him in a graded race, and that wouldn't be the obvious thing to do with a horse you were trying to manipulate a handicap mark for to get in the plate. So the fact that they were happy to go there in the first place means that they might also consider running him here. And bear in mind, if you finish in the first 4 in this race, and you're a small owner, a small trainer, you get to lead your horse back into the winner's enclosure at Cheltenham at the festival. That's a big deal for a lot of them. It would be a massive deal for me. I know people say, well, you'd rather win a £5,000 race than come 4th. Well, you'd be getting more money for finishing 4th here than for most races they'd be winning. And even if you thought, well, you know, he's a 16 to 1 chance for the plate and he looks all right there, you're still, you know, what's your realistic take home when you're a 16 to 1 shot for a 25 runner handicap at the festival? It's not great. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of the outsiders ended up turning up here. I know we touched on Jungle Boogie as an obvious one, and he's been punted today, and there's been money for him in the exchanges as well. Like, my concern about him, if you're backing him at a reasonably short price and thinking of, you know, maybe he might sneak a win here, he's only had 1 run over fences, and that was in January, and he's a notoriously fragile horse. So I'd be worried about it. Well, obviously, with the non-runner no bet, you don't really mind about that so much. I would, knowing you've got that safety net, I would rather take a swing at one at a massive price.
Stolen Silver 250 to 1 as it stands at the moment. The chances are you're just getting your money back, but you never know. You could be lining up with a quarter of the 250 in a 3-runner race.
Yeah, if he runs in a 4 or 5 runner race, that's the biggest thrill I'm getting all week, quite frankly.
On then to the Pertemps, the second race on the card, and there's been a big gamble on Winter Fog in the last week or so, Andy, since we spoke about him with Johnny Ward in the Irish Pointers podcast from last week. He's 6 to 1 favourite now for Emmett Mullins, who of course landed that touch with the shunter in last year's festival. Dunboyne 8 to 1, Cider Burley and Alaphilippe also 8 to 1, Sporting John 9 to 1, Volcano 12 to 1, Panda Boy 14s, the Jam Man 14 to 1. The Big Galloper 14s, Tullybeg 14s, 16 to 1 bar. Andy, I know you often look at this race and you cast a glance immediately over the Irish Sea. Is it the same again this time?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I think this is one of the easiest races to work out with regards to stats, particularly in the last 10 years. And if you condense it, perhaps in the last 6 or 7 years, you only need to look at that Irish qualifier. 6 of the last 7 winners have all come out of that one on the at the Christmas meeting. It was won this year by Panda Boy, who beat Winter Fog, trained by Paul Byrne, who knows a thing or two about landing Cheltenham Festival gambles, i.e. the shunter last year and many other big pots that he's plundered over the time. And if you cast your mind back and go and watch that race, the way he went through that race, he looked like a well-handicapped horse. He come there swinging on the home turn, led down to the last, and then he just got run out of it on the running by the strong finishing Panda Boy on really soft winter ground. Looking at him, I think better ground will suit him. That's the theory anyway. So we're talking on the Thursday, looking at the weather forecast. You can't see it being any worse than good to soft. Yeah. And that's if they water. So really, he should get the perfect setup. I like the fact that he travels really well. When the horses like that give you a chance because they're doing everything easily. They're saving energy. They're not off the bridle and scrubbed along and losing their position. You've got to have plenty of speed as well to hold your position in a 20-odd runner handicap around Cheltenham at the top of the hill. So he should be able to do that. And he hasn't run since. So they've probably had one or two options in the interim, and they've decided to forsake them to keep him here fresh. So he'd be my number one go. I mean, he was obviously 12-1 a couple of weeks ago. He's now only 5-6-1. But hopefully on the day, they might push him out and he might drift and you might get sort of 5-6-1 anyway, but with more places, which makes some sense. The other one to mention is Dunboyne, who had an almost carbon copy run to a Delta Work stroke Sire de Burley in finishing 5th in that qualifier, just about snuck in. And he actually went favourite. He was the anti-post favourite after the back of that run. He then went back to the next meeting, and in a similar race, he made a really bad mistake at the second last, which derailed him completely. And then he was trying to come back again. He got pushed through the rail, so he never got a chance to show what he's worth. The only problem with him is he's quite a big lump of a horse, and I think the drying ground might not necessarily be in his favour as much as winter fog. If it was soft, I think he'd be a big player. But you've got to consider him because he's trained by Gordon Elliott and he ran well in the qualifier. So it'd be stupid not to even consider him. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Top two.
It's boring.
Well, 6-1 and 8-1. It's not.
Well, it's one of those races where I'm looking to get a few. Because I'm talking about multiples and doing Teaupu in the and Adagio in the Champion Hurdle. And there's races where you've only got two runners. You can put Bob Bollinger and Galopin de Champ in if you're that way inclined. Each 3 places onto even money in 5-4. There's another possible angle, and you've got two obvious ones there out of the right race that have been laid out ever since.
Yeah, Winter Fog and Dunboyne, they're 6-1 and 8-1 for Andy. Rory, how are you seeing the Pertemps?
Just a quick mention of the same race, or the one is a much bigger price. Not my selection on the race, but interesting on the same basis. Futurum Regum, who was 3rd in that qualifier, he had no run at all in that big field handicap at Leopardstown at the Dublin Racing Festival, and basically his Owen Walsh, who rode him, just had given up with a couple to go because he was badly positioned and didn't get a clear run, as a few of them didn't. And he's, of course, having finished a really promising 3rd and being an unexposed hurdler, he's 25-1. Now, he's not guaranteed to get in because he's number 37 on the list. And he's trained by a trainer that no one on this side of the Irish Sea will have heard of, in Hugh Finnegan. But if you're punting horses based on the idea that qualifier is gold dust, then I'd certainly be writing off his latest run in 25-1. Is probably too big for Futurum Regum. He might get punted if he does sneak into the race. But the horse I was interested at a similar price in this race was Remastered, a bigger price, even 33s. I surprised to see him in the race in the first place. Horse, most people thought he would have won the Ladbrokes Trophy if he hadn't. I thought was far enough out to be adamant about that, to be perfectly honest. But he was travelling well when he came down. He's run perfectly well in 2 runs since. He hasn't quite justified market support in either of those runs, but they're both in very competitive and long-standing chases at Haydock with Tommy Whittle and then the Peter Marsh last time out, beaten 10 lengths behind Royal Pagaille last time. He switches to hurdles. He warmed up for the Ladbrokes Trophy with a run in a Pertemps qualifier at Aintree, and it was just to get him right for his main early season target. But he ran really well to be beaten just over a length in that contest. The winner hasn't run since. He's been laid out for this. I'm not entirely sure. I think that's the wisest move in the world. The runner-up has run well several times over fences since. And Remastered comes back over hurdles off a much lower mark. And if you look at his form last season, he was he was placed of similar marks to this over hurdles not that long ago. You know, at the Midlands National meeting, for example, he was placed off 132, and he's clearly been going the right way over fences since. I thought it was very interesting that David Pipe, who has of course won this twice before with a horse who's been switched from fences to hurdles, with Buena Vista, had mapped this out for Remastered, and it's not like he's entered him in this and the Midlands National and the Ultima. He's just thrown him in here, and I thought that was very interesting. Well handicapped on his best form, in good form, 10 stone 3 on his back, 33 to 1. Just thought that was you know, a surprisingly big price for a horse with no multiple options. So I've thrown him in a little each way multiple, non-runner no bet at those prices, because I thought that was interesting. He might want the ground a little bit better, but you know, he's got form on very soft ground, but I'd say his best form is probably in good to soft, so he should be fine in that regard. Stays all day. Yeah, it just seems surprisingly big price for a horse with his profile.
Sad fact is that price is no longer 20 to 1 best price as it is at the moment.
Okay, well, there is. Sorry, I'm looking at the price at the moment. There's he's 33 to 1 all in if you wanted to punt him in a place. I keep forgetting that most of the prices I'm seeing are non-runner no bet prices, but one firm has non-runner no bet and an anti-post market as well, and so he's still 33s in one place there. But yeah, he was 20s is about right, I suppose. But the I wouldn't mind backing him all in, because it looks like, you know, with only one entry, he's going to run. If he misses the cut, you get your money back anyway. So it's well worth thinking about that. You know, everyone wants to have the non-runner no bet safety net, but if you know your horse is being aimed at a race and your biggest concern is whether they make the cut or not, back them all in. You will get bigger prices. And firms tend to, I don't know why they do it, but if a horse looks like it's not going to make the cut, they tend to push them out in price, which makes there's no benefit in doing that. So it's always worth doing, as long as you don't mind the fact that you might just be tying up a few bets on potential non-runners. But yeah, he's appealing to me. But that Futurum regimen is also worth looking at. A similar sort of scenario. He's well down the weights at the moment. I don't know how many of these come out. There are plenty of races where if you're number 50 on the list, you're almost guaranteed a run. The Pertemps isn't one of them. Yeah. The very few horses tend to come out of the Pertemps between confirmation and declaration. So you might be sweating a little bit in a couple of those.
Futurum Regum is 25 to 1, Remastered 20 to 1 as it stands on Thursday early afternoon. On then to the Ryanair, and Allaho is the 4 to 6 favourite. We've got a couple in behind him who are unlikely to be running here. Energumene 3 to 1, Aplutard 6 to 1, Chacun Pour Soi 8 to 1. Obviously only their short prices there because that is with non-runner no bet. But Chamblou should 17 to 2, Conflated's 9 to 1, Janadil 10 to 1, Tornado Flyer 11 to 1, Fakir Duderi 12 to 1, Eldorado Allen 14 to 1, Melon 14 to 1, Envoy Allen 16 to 1, Styrian Falange 20 to 1. Andy, Allaho 4 to 6. I imagine not something you're going to be napping at that price, but maybe some each way value against him.
I probably would actually.
Really?
I actually think 4 to 6 is a really good 4 to 6.
I thought I knew you so well.
Well, put it this way: if I was given an option, a choice of backing Honeysuckle, Shiskin, or even Bob Bollinger for that thought, then I think Allaho's the best bet of that lot. Again, we're dealing with a race that will probably cut up quite considerably. You've mentioned a lot of horses that will go elsewhere. You know, the thing is with Allaho, he's got such an air of presence about him, and I think other jockeys will be aware of that. To their own detriment, it would be if they tried to take him on. You saw what happened last year when you got good horses literally waving the white flag halfway down the back straight. You know, your Imperial Auras, your Mr. Fishers of this world, they were literally like on their hands and knees going out from the water jump onwards. And it was only Fakir Duderi that could muster any kind of resistance. I think he's probably one of the each way alternatives if he does run, by the way. But yeah, I just don't see how he's going to get beat. But like again, barring falls, of course, that could always happen. Mistakes creep into the game, you know. Evan Voyellen fell last year when he looked as though the turners was his for the losing. So yeah, we're keeping it short and sweet. His preparation's gone really well. We know he loves Cheltenham. He's danced around there twice, hasn't he? Unlucky in the 3-mile race, and then the Ryanair was just a performance that would live long in the memory. And obviously, us time judges, it left us purring over it. So if he's anywhere near in that same kind of form, there's every reason to believe that he is following his 2 runs. Then I think, like I say, I think 4 to 6 is actually good value.
4 to 6, Allaho for Andy. Rory?
Yeah, he will shorten up. I've got very little doubt about that. Yeah, it's a little bit of a disappointing field this year. I think it looks okay from the entries at the moment, but I think a lot of those are going to melt away, and I think a few of those who could have thrown down a challenge have had slight setbacks in the preparation as well. So it's very hard to be against them, certainly at the current prices. I have suggested somewhere in print that I will take him on the day at whatever price he goes off at, because he will go off really, really short. But that's only on the basis that his win last year saw him run at his absolute limit. It was absolutely spellbinding. He couldn't have gone any faster, and he couldn't have. I don't think he went in short at a single fence. He made one mistake on the way around, but he didn't lose an awful lot of ground from that. And otherwise, he was absolutely winging his fences. And Rachel Blackmore was asking him to do everything perfectly. So it was a perfect storm. It was a performance that he didn't do it within himself. He really pushed himself to the very limit and produced one of the most stunning displays you'll see at Cheltenham. Horses can't keep doing that, would be my argument. Although the bottom line with him at the moment, at 4 to 6, he doesn't have to be anywhere near his best to win this again. I just take the view that I think he ends up being 1 to 3 on the day, and at 1 to 3, I might take a little bit of a chance against him. I'll certainly be looking for each way value against him in the market, but I wouldn't take him on at the moment because the price doesn't represent his dominance in the field. But I think people will look at him as the absolute stone-bunking certainty of the festival, and they will absolutely plough into him on the day, and you might come the off find that there's a little bit of value against him, but not at this stage. The horse that I wanted to back him against him at the post was St Calvados, but for some reason they've gone to the Ascot Chase with him and quite possibly bottomed him in that. If he'd missed that and come here, I'd have been sweet on his chances. Interestingly, he was a non-runner in the race last year when I backed him anti-post on account of the good to soft ground that was deemed not soft enough for him. Paul Nicholls now thinks he wants good ground. Paul wasn't training him last year, of course. He was with Harry Whittington. But I was gobsmacked that a horse could come out of a Grade 1 chase at Cheltenham on good to soft ground, because it wasn't soft enough. Especially as the trainer had made a big point from his novice days, saying, I know he's been winning on heavy ground, but he doesn't need heavy ground. And all of a sudden he's treated as if he does need the ground. Paul Nicholls thinks he doesn't want to go right-handed, and he thinks he doesn't want heavy ground. In fairness, he's just come out of a heavy defeat going right-handed on heavy ground, so it's easy to come to that conclusion. The problem with him in that race is that he bled, and that's really not a very good way of warming up for this race. But he's very well suited to Cheltenham, and he's well suited. He ran an absolute cracker in this race 2 years ago. He's been lightly raced since. I mean, he splits Min and a Plutard in this race, and he is probably unlucky not to win. Gavin Sheehan tried to sneak up the rail on the run-in, which you don't try to do. And I think if he hadn't been quite as cute as that, he might actually have gone and won the race. And on that basis, he'd have a really good chance. Unfortunately, as I said, he's been badly campaigned since that, and that run at Ascot probably knocks him out. But I'd still, at the biggest price I can get, I'd probably still throw a few shekels at him each way. But I wouldn't be betting him as confidently as I did last year. But it will be a half decent each way market from declarations, and I'll hope that Paul Nicholls, a fantastic trainer that he is, would have managed to nurse him back into some kind of form. And if he's right that he'd be a better horse and good ground for him, then he might be able to reward each way support. But it's very hard to be confident about anything against this favourite, certainly at the current prices. And yeah, as I said, on the day, I will be keeping an eye on that each way market and keeping an eye on just how short he gets, with a view to maybe having a small play either each way or against him, but it would be without an awful lot of confidence, and it would be purely based on price.
At 20-1 best price at the moment was one of my very rare tips, wasn't it, Andy, on this show, where I put him up for the King George, and I must say travelled the best
You were spot on,
of any of them,
absolutely
and
spot
then
on,
just didn't quite, made the move a bit too early there, but 20-1 here. Certainly if returning to that kind of form, a much more suitable trip, and goes well at Cheltenham, as Rory says. St Calvados there for the Ryanair, but maybe one to wait until closer to the off, with Allaho currently 4-6, but probably will go off shorter. On then to the stayers, and Rory will stay with you to kick us off in our first run in the stayers. We've got Florian Porter at 7-2, Time Hill 9-2, Champ, whose thoughts from Barry Geraghty we heard earlier, 5-1, Classical Dream 5-1, Paisley Park, who returned to some form last time out, 7-1, Asterion Forlange, and Royal Kahala, both 10-1, Sporting John 12-1, 28-1, Barb. A pretty open-looking stayers here. Without any kind of standout candidate, I guess there's holes to pick in all of them, Rory. I guess the question is, who's got the fewest holes?
Yeah, and that tends to be the way in the Stayers Hurdle. You tend to have your little quirks with horses who are still running over hurdles at this trip. The one who I've come round to, and I came round to him when he was beaten at Christmas, was Florian Porter. He's definitely got his quirks. He showed them when winning this race last year, and he showed them several times prior to that, in that he runs around late on. He can hang violently from the last hurdle, and he almost jinked into the running rail after this last year. And he did the same at Leopardstown when he won the Ryanair Hurdle at Christmas as well. But I was really impressed with his attitude when he was second to Classical Dream in that race this time around. The Christmas Hurdle, I should say, rather than the Ryanair. He missed the break because most of the jockeys thought it was a false start. And it turned, you watch replays of that over and over, and it becomes clear in time that the starter has decided to let them go and is making that move when Classical Dream lunges forward, and the other jockeys thought, well, that can't be right. And Danny Mullins gave the starter quite a mouthful as he left, but he wanted to lead in that race, and he ended up getting left 12-15 lengths. So he's on the back foot throughout, and given that Florian Porter has shown that he's a little bit quirky in the past, I thought he could easily have thrown the towel in at any stage, but he kept on the coattails of Classical Dream throughout that race and just kept trying and trying. And he still ducked around a little bit late on, but that just seems to be a physical thing rather than some kind of, it's not anything to do with being ungenuine. I think he's very genuine, which is a question I had about him last season, but the way he battled that day suggested that he's as game as they come. The yard had been out of form for a fair while, but he's had a flurry of winners in the last week or so. And Gavin Cromwell's will be very happy about his horses coming to Cheltenham on the back of that, including those who might not have been firing already this season. And he probably would have won at Navan in November, but for tipping up in France. Other than that, his jumping's generally very quick and accurate. And the way he won this last year was very impressive. Danny Mullins, I'm sure, will be on board again. And although it's never a race to be lumping on short price ones unless they are those absolute champions that we've seen every now and again. I think Florian Porter is I like him more than Classical Dream, because Classical Dream will either get a flying start, or more likely he will try to get a flying start and be pulled back by the starter. And if Classical Dream isn't able to dominate from the start, and if he ends up having a standing start, that could count against him. Whereas Florian Porter showed that he could overcome a bit of a disaster at the start and still run a really good race. So I think he's the most solid in the race.
Florian Porter, 7-2 best price as it stands. The favourite, the one for Rory in the stayers. Andy, we got a sneak preview of your thoughts here when talking to Barry earlier.
Yeah.
Who do you see as being the value?
I don't think he's value. Florian Porter, 5-2, but he's probably
7-2.
7-2. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, he's the most likely winner. I think me and Rory were doing a podcast together. I think it was after, or maybe just discussing Cheltenham in general. When we both agreed, we were surprised that Florian Porter was still 5-6-1 after he got beat at Leopardstown, given what had happened to him at the start. Very similar to the Blue Lord Riviere d'Etel race. You look at races sometimes, you think, well, I'd have them the other way around here as a punter rather than how the bookmakers go. So sometimes you can, bet against the herd and get a bit of value. my only negative with him is not him in general. It's just it's very difficult to win the Stayers Hurdle back to back. I think you've got to go a little while back now to find. I think it might have been the big books era to find a horse that has followed up his Stayers Hurdle win. It's very much like the Gold Cup. They put such a huge amount of effort to win it. It's difficult to retain it. But you know, if he does get to the front, and there's every reason that he will do this time. Can't imagine that Classical Dream will give him the kind of freebie he got last time out. Then he's going to serve it up for them from the front and be very, very difficult to catch. Because as Rory said, he's incredibly tenacious. He basically would run through a brick wall for you, which is the quote of the owners and the trainer. I just don't like the race as a betting medium. I must admit, it's partly due to the fact that I'm still crying in my own soup with Buzz. I think he'd still probably win this race with a broken pelvis. In traction, I think I still absolutely. It's one of those ones that has rankled with me all season.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It really has annoyed me that he went and got that injury before the long walk, because I thought this was his for the taking. And if he had, like, say, he'd even come here off the back of he'd win previously, I'd still think he'd win the Stayers. But anyway, it's gone now.
We could have had a great argument with that, because I'd have been dead against him in the Stayers.
Oh, really?
So I don't think he'd stay 3 miles.
We can have it if you want.
But
Yeah,
but
well,
it's all irrelevant.
It's all irrelevant. Yeah, exactly. It's just a waste of time. Even
Next year.
yeah, maybe next year. Look, you know, it's a wide open race. You make case up for Tyne Hill. You know, he's got Cheltenham Festival form, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're running the Albert Bartley on Monkfish, gives him a great chance, and you know, represents the long walk along with Champ. And you know, Paisley Park, I mean, look what he did last time out.
I was going to say, are you surprised that Paisley Park is a bigger price than Champ here?
A little bit, because you know, in theory, you give him a 20-length head start, and Champ still couldn't put him to bed. It's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in a race course, with Paisley Park winning last time. And it just shows you know, with this kind of horse, that you never write him off, and anything can happen in a race like this. And I think this is one of the races where I think you can expect something bizarre to go wrong.
This is not a race to come in when they've jumped a hurdle. You want to be watching the start of this race.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
there's potential for lots of fun and games.
I'd probably be against Classical Dream at the price. I think he's the weakest link based on his overall profile. I think he's one of those ones that needs a huge amount of gaps between his races. I think they got greedy last time out. They ran him at Gowran because it was local. Yeah, Willie Mullins thought, I've got to turn up, win this. I'm going to be 3 on, and it's, you know.
I think Willie kind of admits to that as well.
Yeah,
and he assumed because he'd run at Christmas he'd be fit, and he's convinced the horse actually wasn't fit, because he'd let him down after that, and thought that, you know, if you've won a Grade 1 over Christmas and you're turning out at the end of January, you shouldn't have any fitness issues. And the horse didn't get home, and Willie puts his hands up and said, that's my fault.
I think he needs to be box fresh. I think he's one of those ones that almost a year off kind of thing, like an appreciate it job. That's my view on him. But yeah, I think Florian Porter win, but I'm probably reluctant to have a bet in the race at the moment. It's just one of those races that I can't get madly enthusiastic about.
Let's move on then. We've got 3 more races to cover on the card. We haven't got long to do it. So quickly into the plate, where we've got Celebre d'Alen is the 6-1 favourite, ahead of Imperial Alcazar at 8-1. The Glancing Queen 9-1, Birchdale 10-1, Bustleton 12-1. The Shunter has a few entries again, 12-1. Grand Paradis, Fusel Raffles both 14-1, 16-1 Bar. And Andy, I know you're probably a bit unsettled by having a race there that you couldn't put something up in, so we'll get you over that and come to you straight away here to put that right.
The best race to get.
No, I don't mind this race. Again, I like backing novices in this race. I think Simply the Bet's won it a few years ago, and I think Imperial Alcazar, I think connections of that have reluctantly bypassed the Turners, which would have been very appetising to think, hang on, there's a small field here. We could finish, you know, maybe 2nd or 3rd and have a great day. But I think they're really keen on him to win this. He's got bundles of class, always has done, and I've really liked his 3 runs this season over fences. First 2 in smallish fields, and I think he was a bit unlucky to get beat in the one. But he was really good here at the Trials Day. It's a good field as well, lots of fancied horses in that race. I think there's already been a winner out of it as well. I'll have to probably go back and double check, but I think Roy might be able to help me out off air there. I'm pretty sure that race has worked out well, but it was a good time, but I just loved his jumping. He was so accurate, pinpoint. He was really, really good. So yeah, I'm really keen on him. I think he's just a quality horse. I prefer him over the Hobbs horse, Celeb Dalen, who has probably not quite been beating the kind of the horse that Imperial, or running against the kind of horse Imperial Alcazar has. I just think he's very classy and brings good solid course and distance form to the table, so I'll keep it brief with him.
Imperial Alcazar 8-1,
Yep.
The one for Andy, Rory.
Java Point.
That's the one, Java Point, yeah, he got well beat. But yeah, it looked a good race, and that Novice's Handicap, traditionally down the years, I mean, Imperial Aura won it, didn't he?
Yes.
Before he went on to win, and as I said, Simply Bets.
It's always a really strong race. It's over the same.
Very strong race, yeah, very strong race, and this year's Renault looked no different time-wise. And
do you worry about the run in the Pertemps last year at all?
Yeah, I mean that was a bit of a blop on his CV. I don't really know why.
Had a wind up after, so
Yeah.
That might have been something to do with it. You know, it's 3 miles as well. Maybe he's just better. He's a better horse now. They can attack with him now. He's he's had the wind up, but seems to be better over slightly shorter than 3 miles.
He was also beaten ahead by Protectorat in a Novice Hurdle back in 2020, of course.
Well, he was beaten ahead, then awarded the race, and then had the race taken off him.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So some Cheltenham form there. If last year wasn't ideal, Rory, how are you seeing the plate?
I do. I really like Imperial Alcazar as a horse, and he's in my 10 to follow. So I'll be cheering him on anyway. I tend to like the plate, but it's a race I want to see decks for before I get involved in, as a rule. It's one of those races that you can rule a lot of horses out through run style. It's very hard to come from off the pace in this race. If you watch replays of this, what you notice with the plate, because they're running at the track is narrower because they keep a section of the track fresh for the Gold Cup. So there aren't that many places to make ground when they on the chase course on the Thursday, and particularly I've watched lots of replays of old plates, and you see horses travelling well held up, and it's very, very hard to make a move until you get into the home straight. It's difficult to find positions to improve. Whereas on the Friday, when you've got the whole width of the new course, no real issues there. So you do need to have a horse that jumps well and races handily. And that tends to narrow it down enormously. And it's amazing how many times you can stop the race at the second fence and then point to 3 or 4 horses in that first group who end up in the frame. And that tends to help you with your analysis. Much harder to do that without decks, it has to be said. The one that I like at this stage is not a massive price, and that's the Glancing Queen. I thought she's well handicapped on what she's done this season so far. She's proven at the track. She's a novice with graded form, and she ends up getting in here with a remarkably low weight, if I can even find her in the race.
Off 141.
Yeah,
she's not on the King horse, not from what, is it?
Well, he won't be not from 86 then, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's her form this season is very good. She's won 2 listed chases, and then she was runner-up here. She's run very well at the festival before. She ran twice in the bumper, actually, didn't she? And she's really come to herself this season. But yeah, to get in here with 10 stone 12, despite the fact that you've been running in only black type races and running really well, I thought she'd have to go well. The problem with backing her anti-post is that, of course, she's in the Mares Chase, and the Mares Chase is going to have a small field. And I think connections of both the Glancing Queen and Vienna Court, who's just below her in the weights here, will both be tempted to run that race, knowing there's a bit more prestige and the potential for a small field. So they may not go here, but both of them are interesting. And the Glancing Queen at 9-1 is, I think, at the weights she's the most appealing to me. But it's probably a race that I'll look at again once the decks come out and try to find something at a slightly bigger price who will get the run of things.
Imperial Alcazar, the one for Andy, 8-1. The Glancing Queen for Rory at 9-1. On then to the Mares Novice, where Dino Blue has been well backed since Andy gave her a positive mention last week. 5-2 now, best price as short as 2-1 elsewhere. Brandy Love 130, Party Central 11-2, LA Bell 8-1, Grangy and Impervious both 8-1, 14-1 bar. Roy, I'll come to you first, and then we can hear Andy regale about Dino Blue again.
I really like Dino Blue. I was really impressed with her debut win at Clonmel. That did come on heavy ground, and you might be slightly concerned about that. She's by Dr. Dino though, and almost all Dr. Dino's won good ground. So I thought she looked really promising. I know that wasn't a particularly strong race, and she was a short-priced favourite for it. But I loved how accurate she was. Her jumping was absolutely spot on, and she was just thoroughly professional. And I always like to see that in a novice. And I think she will. I think she'll run a decent race. Also, interesting thing. Willie Mullins said he took her away to do a gallop the other day, and he was really surprised how well she went. Which I thought that's an interesting comment for a horse who's heading the market for this race. But I guess she doesn't necessarily show an awful lot at home because of all. I mean, she went off at even money for that pretty ordinary race at Clonmel, whereas one or two of his mares have started at very short prices for theirs. So yeah, we've only had one run to judge her on, and it's not the ideal scenario for any Cheltenham Festival race. But I did like her. Brandy Love, on the other hand, she's got tons of ability, but she's a little bit wayward. Her jumping was a little chancy when she won at Naas, but I thought she showed a hell of a lot of ability that day. But she was jumping out of Paul Townend's hands, and again, you don't really want to see that. You want to see a mare who will sort of allow the jockey to teach her what to do. But I thought, in terms of quality, that she was hiding an awful lot there because she wasn't particularly attentive to what her jockey was asking, and she showed a lot of natural ability. And then at Ferryhouse, she just could not handle the track. She jumped violently to her left, and she ended up running remarkably well there, given how much ground she lost doing that. She's clearly going to be a lot happier going back left-handed. But I'm still not that keen to back horses who show jumping lapses, and she's done that twice now. So there's clearly a lot of potential improvement in her. But I'd rather have Dino Blue from what I've seen so far.
Dino Blue 5-2, and Rory mentions there, Andy, that having one run to judge her on isn't ideal, but you can put a number on that run, and it was pretty impressive.
Oh, everything about that run was just amazing. I mean, I remember I was doing Willie Mill Radio that day, obviously from home, and I was actually timing the sectionals of circuits just for something to do really and give the listeners an idea of time figures on the day kind of thing. And straight away when I did that and was comparing them as they went on, I kept saying, God, this Dino Blue must be good, because the circuit timing that it did, the next race is like 8 seconds slower. Cashback was another one who beat a horse of Chivy Parks, and he was like 9 seconds slower. And as the day went on, it was like, God, this Dino Blue must be incredibly good. They went back and done the overall time figure, and it was exceptionally good. And the only surprise that she hasn't run since. But perhaps they just feel as though that they don't need to run her again, that because she obviously won the first time out, it was brilliant. Why upset a kind of like continuity there, I suppose. There may not have been the right races for her either. But either way, they're very happy just to come here and roll the dice. The fact that she's been punted from much bigger odds into now favouritism is obviously got to be certainly no negative. I just think she's got so much class, and her jumping as well. I mean, I went back and watched that round at Clonmel. She was taking lengths out of the field. Never seen a novice, particularly one for Willie's, jump so fast and accurately. Like when the hurdle was coming up, she was like really going into it. She was like water over it. Unbelievable. So yeah, she sets a very, very high standard, certainly based on the numbers that we've got. I think she's probably one of the best bets of the meeting for me.
One of the best bets of the meeting, 5-2.
Very, very confident that she'll win. It's a great race for Willie Mullins as well. I mean, the horse of Henry's booked the trend last year. Just a bad year for Willie. Maybe he just didn't have that strong.
Not a bad year for Henry either.
And talking about inexperience as well, Willie's almost won this with a newcomer, of course. On her
absolutely,
debut was caught on the line.
Well, Limini and Lorena only won it with 2 runs.
Yeah,
he knows, doesn't he? He's thinking.
Yeah,
and they don't just have one run either. You know perfectly well that they sort the novices out at home at Willie's. No one's ever entirely happy to explain how that is done, but they do get tested. So you're never that worried with one from Willie's yard about its experience over hurdles. Yeah.
Right, we need to move on to the last, because this is going to be a long old show. Nothing wrong with that, plenty of detail here. But the Kim Muir next up, and we've got Frontal Assault as the 9-2 favourite, ahead of Smoking Gun at 8-1, Ain't That a Shame 10, Schoolboy Hours 12-1, 14-1, Deal Kerr, 14s, Fakir Delane, Omar Moretti, Mr. Fog Patches as well, Glenn Lowe 16-1, and plenty others there too. Rory, will come to you for the last on Thursday.
Yeah, I thought that I watched the race at Ferryhouse in January and decided that was the key to the Kim Muir, and it was a beginner's chase won by Fleur, who beat Frontal Assault, and Grand Paradis, who dead heated for second, all trained by Gordon Elliott, who loves to run a novice in the Kim Muir. Fleur obviously won on the run of the Grand National Trial, ran very well after that, and is too high in the weights. But both Frontal Assault and Grand Paradis were given marks of 145 here. They were clear of Egality Mon, who boosted the form by winning next time out. So immediately I decided this was the race to concentrate on. This used to be a race for good old plotters, and it's not anymore. It's a race for improving novices, and Gordon Elliott particularly has kind of found the key to that. I like Grand Paradis as a horse now. He's drifted in the betting for this recently, which kind of suggests that he's shortened up for the plate. But I think this will suit him down to the ground. Looking at the race, Grand Paradis was always handy. Was joined on the line by Frontal Assault, who got outpaced and stayed on strongly. Now, Frontal Assault ran in the Martin Pipe last year over 2.5 miles, got outpaced and stayed on late in the day. And he is absolutely screaming out for 3.25 miles, which is why he's favourite for the race. But in saying that, given that they are identical horses in terms of the Irish form, they dead heated last time out, they're running off the same mark. I thought the fact that Grand Paradis was about 2.5 times the price was a wee bit insulting to him, because he will stay beyond 3 miles as well. I liked him first time out. He fell at Down Royal in a very strong novice chase, but I liked the way he went through that until he came down at the second last. And he was then probably out of his depth in Grade 1 company next time out. And again, made a couple of mistakes. His jumping's got better in his last 2 starts. He's just gradually getting better, and he's the kind of horse who will be at his peak at Cheltenham. So I want to have him on side, because he's going to be a reasonable price. I completely see the argument for Frontal Assault, but he is, he's quite a short price favourite for this. His first try at 3.25 miles should see him improve. I'm just a little bit wary of horses who get outpaced in races at any kind of trip, because you can still do that in this race as well. And I'm less inclined to back him at the short price, even though I completely understand the argument that he should improve markedly for the step up and trip. But I think Grand Paradis will improve as well. I hope he runs here, even though the market sort of suggests that he might be dropping back to the plate. But I think Gordon's had this race in mind for him for a fair while, and I hope that's where he goes in his pre-festival stable tour. Before we saw the weights, this was the race he was talking about for him. And I think he would have preferred to get a little bit less than 145, but given that Frontal Assault, who's favourite for the race, and will definitely go in there, has got the same mark and has the same chance on paper, I see no reason why the pair of them shouldn't run. And if they do, then I'd rather take the bigger price about Grand Paradis.
Grand Paradis 16-1 as it stands at the moment. As you say, Frontal Assault heads the market at 9-2. Andy?
Yeah, going back to that race that Rory's referring to, it's probably one of the best lines of the whole season with regards to commentary. Jerry Hannon, he comes up with some sayings. And Florian made a bad mistake. He jumped it like a bag of hammers. Jumped it like a bag of hammers.
No idea.
Absolutely, yeah. He also said, "Oh, that put the cross on me the other day in a beginner's chase." He called something wrong. He said, "Oh, that's put the cross on me." I don't know where he gets them from. No, he's good value, Jerry is. But yeah, I mean, going back to that beginners, funny enough, nobody's mentioned Everglow, who finished 10 lengths fifth that day. But he's an interesting runner out of that race, 20-1, yeah. When I went back and watched that race again, sort of on the final circuit, I was just watching Everglow as well, because I've seen all the others. I know what that form amounts to. But he hasn't run since, so they're quite happy with that run, I think. So if you think 1 or 2 ahead of him were well handicapped, who were trying a little bit harder, let's say, or obviously they were gung ho and full bore, where this fellow was just given a bit of a sighter. Yeah, I think he's a big price at 20-1, and noticeably he ran quite well in last year's Pertemps behind Mrs Milner for Old Connections. But you look at some horses he's run against. He ran against Blue Lord.
6.5 lengths beat by Blue Lord.
Yeah,
12.5 lengths beat by Gabinaco.
Yeah, you look at run against Gabinaco, Farouk Delane, Elm Baton, Blue Lord. And he ran really well in that.
And only one of those races close to 3 miles,
exactly.
Even though he's got proven stamina.
Absolutely. He's an out-and-out 3 miler. Noel Mead's done really well as well this season with his shape. Obviously, Schoolboy Hours won the Paddy Power. So, yeah, I don't know who's going to ride him. I have no idea. But if he gets a decent amateur, he could be worth a shout. And a horse I absolutely love, I've got to mention him as well. I'm presuming Garrick O'Rock will hopefully go for the Ultima, because I don't want 3 selections in this race. But like I say, non-running, I bet you could play around with Garrick O'Rock. The other one, I've always loved this horse, and he's got a great body of work, and I think he'd probably be better off in a race like this, is Mr. Fog Patches. Was he 3rd in last year's Scottish National? Maybe 2nd or 3rd. But he's literally turned up every time and left it out on the track ever since. He ran behind Run Wild Fred in the Troy Town. He ran an amazing race behind Brayside in the Cork National Trial. He was last with the circuit to run on bottomless ground, and he somehow heaved himself into 4th or 3rd. And then he ran behind Commodore at Cheltenham, having a sidetrack at the track early on in the year. So we know he goes around Cheltenham.
And that was in good ground as well. Was, he's got lots of form in the mud because he's a third stayer.
Absolutely. Handles good ground. He actually, I think, because he's a small horse, he doesn't want heavy. Yeah. He's run last time out at the Thyestes. It needs to be seen to be believed. It was a day where he had to race wide. Longhouse Poet went all the way around the outside. Got an advantage. So did Franco de Port. He was like an absolute swamp round the end. Anything that ran up the inside had no chance. Cocoa Beach, Death Duty. I put up Death Duty the next day because he went round the inner.
Oh yeah, it's always worth watching which horses stick to the.
Yeah, I mean Brayside was fantastic. He went round the inside and was tailed off. The only horse that finished in the first 3 having run round the inside was Mr. Fog Patches. And the time figure that day was furlong per furlong, miles better than Course Sublime. Course Sublime was about.
Oh, it was desperately slow.
It was about 25 lengths slower than the Garin race on the final circuit. They were absolutely flying. It's really solid form, that Thyestes. And Mr. Fog Patches. If he gets, I think he'll get it because he's 23 and 24 maximum field, so he's definitely going to get it. I don't know who's going to ride. I've been heard on the grapevine that Paddy Mullins has been sniffing around after him. So if Paddy gets the leg up, he hasn't got another ride.
He won't get that price, will he?
He will not. But what is he?
14 to 1 best price at the moment.
Yeah. Looking at the vibes on the exchanges, there's money queuing up to back him. So there's a good chance that he's going to run. So 14 to 1 him and Everglow. Just a couple of other options beyond the obvious ones there for me.
So throw a negative in there as well, because I think people will be interested in it. But discordantly, he's got a £5 penalty for coming back to form and winning well at Leopardstown the other day. He's in the Ultimate, he's in this. It was interesting to hear connections say afterwards that they thought dropping him back in trip might have been the key. They thought he was a stayer, but his 2 wins in the last 2 years have both come at 2 mile 5. And they were talking about keeping him to that trip. So he's obviously got the entries over 3 mile 1 and 3 mile 2 at Cheltenham, and plenty of people will see, that he's potentially well in under a £5 penalty, having finally got it together. He's a horse who's always looked like he's got the ability to win a big handicap, but he's been a bit disappointing in some of those. He finished 6th thing in the Ultima last year. He wasn't beaten that far in the Thyestes, but he's just he had been a little bit disappointing. But then Robbie Parr came on. He's made all the running, which is a bit of a change of tactics as well, and he looked impressive. But that was 2 mile 5, and I think the key is that they've got the trip run with him for the last couple of years.
Lovely stuff. That brings us to a close of our Thursday preview, day 3 at the Cheltenham Festival. Before I let the guys go, though, I'm going to ask them for their nap, their best bet of the day. Andy, I think we know yours. We'll come to you
my
first.
chips in on Dino Blue.
All in Dino Blue for Andy.
Yep.
Rory?
When he's got to think about it, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign.
It's not. It isn't a good sign. Well, no, I never tend to think about it in the first place, and I can't go Dino Blue.
We can double that.
I don't want to keep going shorties either.
That's all right.
Because I've gone a shorty on the first day when I fancied a couple of outsiders. So I'll go Grand Parody. Okay. Again, I know that he might run elsewhere, but he's a horse I want to keep on side in handicaps at the festival.
There you go, Grand Parody. Thank you very much to both Rory and to Andy for sharing their expert tips and advice on this preview of day 3 of the Cheltenham Festival. You can find day 1, day 2 and day 4 on the oddschecker YouTube channel and on any podcast platform as well. Thank you to 888 Sport for sponsoring the show as well, and to their ambassador Barry Geraghty for sharing his time and his thoughts with us too. Hopefully plenty of winners in there, certainly some very good insight. So do enjoy the 3rd day of the Cheltenham Festival, and as ever, please do ensure that you're gambling responsibly.